Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Gar Borras' Time Machine. And today, Gar, we're going to be talking all about Young Frankenstein. I got to tell the folks listening to this that this was your suggestion, great idea, and you were just sharing with me that this is one of your movies that you just has become a Halloween tradition. Around every Halloween, this is one of the films you always watch. So let's talk about how you first got exposed to this film and, became such a huge fan of it.
Well, I just remember way back in the mid-'70s when the movie came out.
Yeah.
It got a lot of fanfare, and I think a lot of the reason why it got a lot of fanfare was because Mel Brooks' movies were like super successful, huge money-making movies for the studios back in the 70s, and they had just done Blazing Saddles, which just that movie just was just such a huge success. And so there was a lot of fanfare, commercials, advertisements, and everything like that. And the second you see the advertisements, you just know, oh my gosh, what are they going to do with this?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it was just a natural thing that that you wanted to see the movie. And then when everybody saw the movie, nobody was disappointed. Everybody loved the movie.
Yeah. And I got to ask you, because we just posted yesterday our episode we did on Frankenstein, the original Universal horror film from 1931. So I know you're a fan of all those classic horror movies, and of course this is kind of a spoof on that. So having seen the original Frankenstein horror film, and then you see this, I mean, kind of compare the two. Totally different in a lot of ways, but they add that comedy element to Young Frankenstein.
And the comedy was perfect.
Yeah.
It was absolutely perfect. But there's for people like me that are huge, horror films, classic horror films, or, like spooky films, because the old stuff wasn't really horror. It wasn't really scary. It was just more spooky. You know what I mean? But, for anybody that's into, the older spooky movies and stuff like that, when you watch Young Frankenstein, it just wouldn't have done it justice if they had done their own set of the laboratory with all those machines and everything like that. And, Mel Brooks wound up getting in touch with the person that was behind making that whole set for the original 1931 movie, and he talked him into renting out that all of that stuff so they could use it for the laboratory scene. And my God, every time I watch it, I marvel at how perfect everything is in the just the machines and the sparks and the all the different things going on. You know what I mean? It was just just another small snapshot of the brilliance of Mel Brooks in the vision of making the movie. But and not just Mel Brooks, but him and Gene Wilder, because it was a collaboration between the two.
Oh yeah. In fact, the script, or the screenplay rather, was written by both Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder. I mean, Gene Wilder, I think, came up with the concept and came to Mel Brooks, but then they created the storyline together, and two just comedic geniuses coming together. And an interesting fact regarding Young Frankenstein, as you just stated about the sets, the guy's name, I guess, who created the original sets from a 1931 film that you're talking about, his name was Kenneth Strickland. And the interesting thing, as I was reading, after the 1931 film, he's the guy that had designed those sets, and he'd he'd kept the sets, and they were actually being stored in his garage at home. And Mel Brooks found out about this, like you said, and contacted him. And as a result, not only were the original sets used in Young Frankenstein, but the set designer, he actually, Mel Brooks allowed him to receive like a credit in the film, for being the set designer, which he, I understand, did not get any credit for in the original film. Kind of interesting.
That's, unfortunately, if you look at the old films when they do the credits,
yeah.
It's like there's really not that much. You actually think, well, gosh, there must not have been that many people working on the set.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because nowadays when you see movies, it goes on for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You know what I mean? After a movie, of all the different credits. But in those old movies that were made back in the 1930s, those credits were much shorter. It was like, boom, and it's over.
Yeah, and speaking of the credits,
there were people that that were working on the set that got missed, and I don't know if it was just like not really giving him the credit due, or maybe they didn't think of it as much of an importance as it was, but they didn't give him credit, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah, well, I think it was a lot more innocent than that, and what I mean is, like even when you put together a movie and you work on a movie crew, these days, there's a whole thing, and a whole effort that goes to that. Into, it's somebody's job just to make sure, to write down every single person's name that is working on that crew. You write down their position and what they do, so that they do receive a proper credit. Now, I will tell you, one of the very first things I noticed the other day when I put the DVD of Young Frankenstein in my DVD player at home is, I noticed as the film is opening, not only is it black and white, which we're going to get into in a minute, but the credits roll at the beginning of the film. And I was reading in regards to Young Frankenstein, the reason Mel Brooks decided to do that is he wanted to give it the same atmosphere that the original film had. And in the original film in 1931, the credits, if you look at that film, they roll in the beginning. And it's one of the things you can't help but notice in watching Young Frankenstein.
You hit the head on the nail. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because you're so right. Every time I see it, that's exactly how I feel too. Yeah. It really sets the tone, for the whole backdrop of the movie and everything. It really, really captures, the feeling from the original. Yeah, and then in fact, talking about that a little, Mel Brooks, I understand when when they were starting to work on the film, he initially went to Columbia Pictures, and when they heard that he wanted to do it in black and white and all that, they were against it, and so he said, "Well, if you're not interested in doing my way, I'll go to another film company." He went and he ended up with going to 20th Century Fox, and again, you watch that film all these years later. Because again, the film, just to give people a time frame when we're talking, was originally released December 15th, 1974. And so for that time, you watch the film all these years later, and you're like, Mel Brooks kind of knew what he was talking about, because even though this is now considered a classic film, it's still just as relevant today. And even though it seems kind of maybe dated, it doesn't look dated. You just have a feeling of a great horror flick. Well, to me, the thing that separates people that do certain things from the people that do the same things, but they're an artist, is their vision. Visionaries, trailblazers, as you were talking about before. Because there's a whole bunch of people that do this kind of stuff and everything like that. And they might have some some semblance, some type, some success, but the ones that have vision, those are the artists. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because those people don't grow on trees. It's like the Gene Wilders of the world and the Mel Brookses of the world, and there's a ton of other people too that have that it separates them from the others too.
Yeah.
Is the vision, and that's a that's something that is really hard to find.
Yeah, and talking a little bit about Mel Brooks for a minute. I mean, he is an American actor, and he's typically in almost all of his films. This is the only one he doesn't really appear on screen, and part of the reason is when Gene Wilder approached him about doing the film, he kind of made the request that I'll let you direct the film and all this, but I just don't want you to appear in the film. And he still kind of makes a couple of appearances, like he does the voice of like a cat or something, but you never see him on screen, which is kind of. But if you look at some of the films,
I think somewhere along the line he played an angry villager.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's odd. You know what I mean? But I think Gene Wilder was right.
Yeah.
About that, because I had seen other movies where Mel Brooks does do that. He'll do an appearance, and then he'll look at the camera, and it's like a wink, nudge kind of comedy thing. And that's not, Gene Wilder was right. It's not part of the whole thing of the Young Frankenstein. You know what I mean? It's kind of, it takes it off track.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you look at any of Mel Brooks' films you've mentioned, like Blazing Saddles, the Producers, even Spaceballs, they all have something in common. They're all like kind of farces, but you can tell they're Mel Brooks films, if you know what I mean. They're all films that we still talk about all these years later. They all pretty much kind of stand out. Now, I'll tell you what really stand out to me about this film, and I think maybe Gene Wilder was on to some not having Mel Brooks appear in the film, because after watching this film, I've always, for most of my life, thought of Gene Wilder. I loved all those comedy movies he did, like with Richard Pryor, and like a lot of people, I thought of him as kind of a lovable, kind of comedic genius, clown, if you will. But I had a different view of him after watching this film. It's almost this. We're supposed to think of this as an American kind of horror comedy film, and it is that. But I thought, man, I've never seen Gene Wilder in a film quite like this, and he was often quoted as saying that this was his favorite role, and I could see why, because if you watch any of those other comedy movies like we're talking about, they're funny and everything, and he's great at what he did, but there was just something different about Young Frankenstein where you almost consider him as like a serious actor.
Well, he could let loose as an actor, and for actors and actresses, that's heaven.
Yeah.
When you can let loose with your character and just go with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just get really expressive with your character and everything. And boy, does he get expressive. You know what I mean? All the times where he raises, the classic Mel Brooks, the raising his voice to the point where it's like he's yelling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
In fact, I'll tell you, one of the first things I picked up in the film right away, but I took notice of, is, he's supposed to play, Frankenstein's grandson, but I love his play on the name. It's not Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein. Yeah, like, okay. Yeah. And then the other thing with Young Frankenstein, watching it from start to finish, I mean, we've called it a comedy, a horror flick, and it's all that and more. I mean, more, even you got elements of it being a musical, like, the song and dance routine. I mean, wow.
Yes. And they actually, later on, through a different production, Mel Brooks collaborated with the person behind the music of Young Frankenstein, and they actually did a musical of Young Frankenstein.
Now that's getting, really, really creative. And, talking about the black and white element, for a brief second again, I was reading also that once he agreed to give a film to 20th Century, they were trying to trick Mel Brooks into like, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll have a film in black and white, but we're going to record it. We're going to record it on color film still. That way we can show it in other parts of the world in color. And he's like, I'm not falling for that. No, we're going to film it in black and white, and that's it.
Well, there's another thing that when Gene Wilder actually pitched it for the first time to Mel Brooks, they were working together on Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
And at first, Mel Brooks, he wasn't warm to the idea.
Yeah.
And everything, and then later on, while they were still doing Blazing Saddles, he decided to, pitch it again to Mel Brooks. And the way he pitched it, caught
his attention.
Mel Brooks' attention because of the twist on, Dr. Frankenstein's grandson being embarrassed about the family and trying to separate himself from the family stigma and everything.
Yeah.
And then that got Mel Brooks' attention, and he liked that take on it because that's a take that nobody has ever envisioned.
Yeah, and Young Frankenstein, what stands out to me too, watching the film, is it is very much, it's not even trying to be a repeat of a 1931 film. It's like, let's not only do a different take on it, but let's kind of have a little bit of a comedy thing in there. And again, it's less about the monster and kind of almost, the grandson being embarrassed, and kind of even more of a tale of what his life has been like since. And I want to just kind of mention this real quick, because I think you're going to have an appreciation of this, Gar. For people listening to this, Mel Brooks is known for comedic parodies. He's an American actor, director, and screenwriter. And he's done these comedic parodies such as Young Frankenstein in 1974 and Spaceballs in 1987. Mel Brooks started his career as a writer for, of all things, Sid Caesar's variety show. And Brooks was also, this is where I'm getting to, but you're going to love, was a writer for the now classic 1960s hit TV show Get Smart. I never knew that. I never knew that. Wow.
Well, he was working when he was working with Sid Caesar, he was working with other people as writers when they were early in their career too, that turned out to be icons too. What's his name? Rob Reiner, the father.
Carl Reiner.
Carl Reiner, the father of Rob Reiner, was one of the writers on Sid Caesar's show too, and there was a very hugely popular comedian that went on to have his own show. What was that guy's name? He always had a straight face. And oh man, it'll come to me.
Yeah, okay.
But he went on to become hugely successful. Had his own TV show that ran for a long time, back in the '60s or the '70s or something like that. And but that's who Mel Brooks was working with on Sid Caesar's show.
Wow.
And this is just like a writer's crew that's literally a who's who.
Yeah.
That it turns out later on.
I was very surprised to read that connection to Get Smart. And I also need to bring up this guy, Kenneth Strickland. He's the set designer we were mentioning earlier, who designed the sets that were used in both films. And the thing we should note about him, but again, if you go back to the 1931 Frankenstein film, those are some of the earliest movies, and they're just kind of learning how to make movies at the time. And so, again, with Frankenstein, as we talked about the 1931 film, a big part of that was the special effects. And this guy, Kenneth Strickland, was an electrician, a set designer, electrical special effects creator, starting with his effects in the 1931 film Frankenstein, and he became Hollywood's premier electrical special effects expert for over 100 motion pictures. Now for over 100, and I bring this up because, again, going back to 1931, you think they're just learning how to make movies, and something that's as common as writing down everybody's name and giving them a proper credit. I mean, that may have happened as a result of this film being
People
made.
like him.
Yeah, because of him. And if it had not been for this guy in the original Frankenstein film, special effects, I mean, he's the first special effects, I guess, expert, might not have, gone on to be as important as they are in movies today, you know?
Yes, he honestly, you can absolutely say he was a trailblazer.
Yeah.
A trailblazer for an entire industry that works behind the scenes in movies and TV and all of that stuff.
And that's why,
because that's an entire industry. That's a whole section.
And even as we're talking about Young Frankenstein,
has its own union and everything.
And even if we're talking about, Young Frankenstein, while, Mel Brooks is looking at what they did, the original 1931 film, he doesn't want to make a clone film, but he's like, man, look at what they did with those special effects. I would love to have a set like that, and he just happens to come across a guy that still owns a set. It's in his garage, and that's why a big part of why Young Frankenstein has that kind of classic atmosphere of a black and white film and everything we're talking about, and all the same special effects. And it's like, why go to somebody else when you're able to go to the original originator, the creator, if you will.
Yeah. And then Marty Feldman, pulling the switches and turning the knobs.
Yeah.
He, just his whole body movements and everything, like it was all perfect. It was perfect. In capturing, the whole thing of that, with the machinery and everything and the sparks and the excitement of, bringing the dead back to life and everything like that. But, Marty Feldman was one of those unsung heroes of the movie, too.
Yeah.
Because I just can't imagine anybody else ever playing the part of Igor or Igor, however you want to say it.
I think it's Igor. But now, talking about Igor, this is another thing as a music fan that I knew nothing about before I did the research. But come to find out, because of Igor and Marty Feldman, there's a line in the movie where he says, "Walk this way." And come to find out, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith sees the film. Very next morning goes and writes the classic Aerosmith tune, which is a classic now all these years later, "Walk This Way." I mean, amazing. You have these two mediums coming together. Great film influences a great singer like Steven Tyler from Aerosmith to go and write a great, what is now considered a classic rock tune all these years later.
They were. There was a point when they were editing. After they had done all of the filming and they were editing the movie together and everything, that Mel Brooks wanted to pull that out.
Yeah, I read that, and because he went to a screening one day of the film and he's seen the way the audience reacted to that part of the film, he said, "You know what? Maybe the audience knows something I don't," and decided to keep it in. And that is so true, because initially when people are seeing films like this for the first time, I mean, like I've seen it years later. I seen it years ago and I forgot how great it was. But that's more of an honest reaction, because people are seeing the film for the first time, and for the director kind of see that, oh wow, okay, so that's really resonating with these people, and it resonated, if you think about it, to the point that it even inspired Steven Tyler the next morning after he sees the film to go and write "Walk This Way." So again, that's an honest reaction I think people are having, as opposed to, could you imagine if maybe the song "Walk This Way" had been written, and put in Young Frankenstein originally for that purpose, and people are seeing the film, and because the song is in the film, maybe you think, oh yeah, Aerosmith, Young Frankenstein, but this is actually where the film inspires the songwriter to write a hit song.
That's how art happens.
Yeah.
That's how, that's really how it happens.
In all these years being an Aerosmith fan, I've never heard like Steven Tyler tell that story. And I think it'd be a great story to tell you. It's actually Young Frankenstein. I've seen that film and wow.
One of my favorite, absolutely, I mean, not to take away, because, Cloris Leachman, Terry Gar, Madeline Kahn, Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all just like amazing characters in this movie. But my favorite character is a character that, never became a household name like all of these other people. Yeah. But his character in that movie, Young Frankenstein, is just it has to be the best character he's ever come up with for anything, because it's that Inspector Kemp.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That guy, I remember, the first time I ever saw that movie, I just died laughing.
Yeah.
At how does somebody have the vision to come up with a character like that with all of these different weirdnesses about him? The way he talks. You can't tell. Even the people that speak German, that's his language that he speaks, but even the people that speak German can't tell what he's saying.
Yeah, and one thing was really obvious in Young Frankenstein that I was watching that you made a huge point about during our Frankenstein conversation was this. You said, well, you told me at one point in that conversation, just imagine anybody kind of going up against a mob, having a whole mob of people chasing you, okay? And so there's that scene, where even he doesn't call it a monster, Dr. Frankenstein, Frederick Frankenstein. He calls it the creature. He's gonna appear before the public and show off the creature. And then everybody's kind of fearing the creature, but he decides, you know what? Instead of me being afraid of what I created, I'm going to try to show it love. I'm going to try to tell him he's beautiful, that I love him, and you kind of see the creature, the monster, whatever you want to call it, kind of go through this melody of emotions from because it gets to that point where when you tell him he's beautiful, you get like a positive reaction, and he's happy, and he's singing, and he's and then at one point he's singing and dancing, as we said. And then when the mob starts to go crazy, he starts kind of, as you said, reverts back to the monster, And I thought, that's I noticed what Gar's talking about now, right there. It's in that.
It's just that's what I was. When we were actually discussing, doing this, that's one of the things that I said to you is, are you sure an hour is enough?
Yeah, I don't,
because there are so many details, to the movie. Yeah. Even the classic scene at the end where they have the mob chasing him down and wanting to, come and get him and either kill him or bring him to justice. Most mobs just want to kill you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that really captures the mob scene just like it was in the original 1931 movie.
Yeah, and another thing that stood out to me, Gar, that we discussed about last time when we were discussing Frankenstein was they totally, because of the controversy from the original film, okay, they did not even include the part about I know what it's like to feel like God, but they leave the one scene at first. You see where they're worried that something's happened to the little girl, that she's gone off and run away, or the monster's got her. And then all of a sudden there's that comedic almost kind of scene where she just flies from outside back into her bedroom window, and they go and check on her. She's safe, and they never realize that she was gone or something. And I'm like, oh, what a way to kind of alter that scene from the original film.
They turned it into lighthearted.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's great. What they did.
I think that was an excellent choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a comedy.
Yeah.
That's it's just the brains behind this movie. The incredible amount of thought.
Yeah.
That went into making it and everything. And then the Madeline Kahn character.
Oh yeah.
She, she was an amazing comedian that had a hugely long career and everything, and but just her character in that movie, where when she marries the monster, and then she winds up looking like the bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And everything. But she just had, there was always an electricity that she brought to scenes.
Yeah, and we're going to be.
If you notice that,
yeah.
you know what I mean? There was. She never brought, anything that would make a scene dull to the scene. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
There was no such thing as dullness in her scenes.
Oh, no. In fact, it's kind of one of the first, I don't want to say first, but one of those classic ensemble films where you got all these great actors. I mean, Gene Wilder, obviously, kind of really a standout role for him. But all the other actors, you kind of really notice them there is just as important to the story as he is. And just kind of, I was reading, on the film's 40th anniversary, Mel Brooks said that he considered Young Frankenstein by far to be his best film as a writer-director, but does not consider it to be his best, his funniest film. Which, I'm watching, I think, hey, this is pretty funny. And I think what makes it so funny is another film you brought up last time we were talking about Frankenstein from 1931. You're saying, another Frankenstein-related film you love is, which I have to agree, Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein, and it's kind of got a comedy bent to it as well. But I think where Young Frankenstein kind of differs is this is a combination of everything. Like I said, it's a musical, it's comedy, it's horror, and it's horror in the sense that maybe because it's based on Frankenstein, the original 1931 film, but it's not, the horror is not really done in a way they want to scare the hell out of you. It's just kind of based on the original film. And then you got the comedy aspect. I mean, and then even having a scene where the monster's got a top hat on and a cane and he's doing a song and dance routine. I mean, that is original. That is what Mel Brooks was great at doing here. It really accomplished something with this film, I think,
Well, everybody, it seemed like everybody was influenced by the other actors and actresses, and it just seemed that, all of these actors that were working together in this movie just, raised the bar so high in how they were developing the characters.
Yeah, and
they were all bigger than life characters. The Frau Blucher.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, I don't know.
I almost expected some horses to whinny in the background when I said that.
Yeah.
But you look at her character and everything like that, and it's just like I'm sure she was looking at everybody else and was going, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to raise my game way up."
Oh yeah,
and and she did. That character, that was just just such a perfect, creepy lady.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like nothing you'd ever seen before, and you're like, oh man, that's kind of interesting. And Terry Garr's another one, classic actress from that time. But it's kind of sad that this is probably one of the things she'll be remembered for, in the sense that as great of an actress as she was, she kind of, I don't know what happened, she just disappeared and never heard from her.
For some people, I'm sure it's just life. Personal life choices.
Whatever,
instead of doing movies and going this way, I think I'm going to go this. Personal life decisions. But she did wind up, coming back to TV and things like that, and she wound up, she wound up having a very successful career. But I would have to say, her most memorable character is Inga from Young Frankenstein. You know what I mean? She, it was kind of a simple character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I heard that Mel Brooks, just the way she showed up to the audition, he just hired her right there on the spot.
Yeah, I remember. I remember her from back in the day, and that's the thing. I got to say, if this was the only film anybody had on their resume, not a bad thing to have on your resume. And talking about, just how the film over the years has resonated with people. I was reading, Young Frankenstein was a box office hit, favorite of critics and moviegoers alike, Gar. Young Frankenstein ranked at number 28, it said, on Total Film Magazine's reader list of the 50 greatest comedy films of all time. That's really saying something here.
Going beyond all of the elements that you were talking about that they brought to the movie and everything, just the fact that horror, comedy, this, that, and everything like that. But, it's just, that the movie never gets old.
No
matter how many times you watch it, you still laugh at these different scenes.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there isn't. There are other movies that encompass a lot of areas in which also make those movies, their beauty and everything like that. But, you take away some of those elements that you were talking about, that, and the movie would never have been the same.
Yeah, and I can tell you, honestly, sitting here watching the film the other night at home, I was like, I don't want to be disturbed. I'm not getting up to even go to the bathroom. I was so into every scene of the film, and it's almost like by the time it's over. Wow. It was just that good of a film to me. And I was also reading Young Frankenstein was featured in the year 2000 on the American Film Institute's list of 100 years of 100 laughs. And again in 2005 on the American Film Institute's list of 100 years, 100 movies. The most famous quotes, and this is important because this is the Film Institute, and they have these lists they come up with, Gar, that I think I was sharing with you before, of like these memorable films of everybody just, as I was talking about, you always remember them, and they're considered classics now. And so, to have the American Film Institute kind of point their finger in the direction of one of these films, that's a pretty big thing,
Well, the movie also has to be one of the most quoted movies of all time. Has anyone ever done anything like that? Like, which movies are the most quoted from?
I don't know.
I think when we do, the movie quote in the future, I think both of us will look into that, when we're doing our research.
Yeah,
for doing it and everything. But I don't think when they were making the movie that they were thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be a quote. It's going to eventually become a catchphrase.
No, in fact,
nobody envisioned that. They didn't do it for that. It just wound up that way.
In fact, that's the beauty of a lot of these films is, okay, I can accuse a lot of people maybe these days of, we got to come up with a catchphrase, and we're going to, this is going to be the line. But like when a lot of these classic films that we talk about were made, like you said, it just kind of happened organically. A great example of that is one that always stands out to me. I love the film, Forrest Gump, for example, is a great example of that.
Love that movie.
Cause it's almost like going through like a history book. There's a scene where he supposedly meets John F. Kennedy, and then he talks, down, a little down the line and through the film. He's like, "Oh, I just heard about that nice president I met. He was shot the other day. Poor guy."
Just another movie, just like Young Frankenstein, that has many elements and many facets,
and even
in the movie.
Yeah, one of the lines that stands out, not just to me but a lot of people, that's one of these famous it's become a famous quote, is like, and I think part of the reason people latched onto this is because like when I saw the film, it's like, okay, not only is it a great line, but it kind of really captures what the film is about. Captures what Forrest Gump, his character, is like the part where he says, "My mom always said life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." and then you hear about not just once, but quite a few times throughout the film, so it resonates, kind of like a song lyric. It sticks in your head.
It's such a heartwarming thing to say.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, yeah, that Forrest, he just loved his mama, and when his mama died, he was so sad.
But that's just there are many movies just like Forrest Gump that have many facets, just like Young Frankenstein. It's just incredible the amount of creativity. But I think. My guess, this is just my guess, is I think the reason why is it's a reflection of how much fun they were having making it.
Yeah, and I was reading too, what's amazing is you would think a film like this would, win some kind of like Academy Award, and I forget what it is. It was nominated for like 2 things, but didn't win any award. And you're like, man, how is that even possible? And again, I was reading that Gene Wilder named Young Frankenstein as his favorite film of his entire career. Now, just think about it. A guy would have had a career like that. Probably next to Young Frankenstein, I'd probably say his most memorable role would have to be maybe Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. And I mean, and if you put this and Young Frankenstein, and those 2 films kind of back to back, I mean, there are 2 films from his career that really stood out. Really memorable. I mean, even Willy Wonka this year was celebrating like its 50th anniversary, if you can believe that. And so what a thing to say that's favorite film of my career.
Of all the things that he's done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another movie that he made. Back in the 70s, that was, it was, a very successful movie back in the 70s, but nowadays it's completely lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
But it was a really good, funny movie.
What's that?
It was called Silver Streak.
Oh, I'll have to see that. I may have seen it. I can't remember.
That's why I'm telling you about it, because, dude, that's one you're going to want to see. It's a Gene Wilder movie.
Yeah.
It's not a disappointment. It's funny, and it's well done.
Another one is, I think it was from the 80s. It was Richard Pryor again. It was called See No Evil, Hear No Evil. One of them is like completely deaf, and one is completely blind. And you got like the blind and the deaf leading each other, and they get all these crazy predicaments, as you can imagine. But it was just a classic film.
Those movies, because they did a few of them together. Between Gene
quite a few.
You know what I mean? But they were very successful. Those were huge money-making movies. The collaboration that those 2 had. And
now you mentioned one of the favorite characters for you in Young Frankenstein is Igor. And interesting about Igor, I was reading Igor's hump was an ad-lib by actor Marty Feldman. And what I mean by that is when they would go to rehearsal and stuff, and they were shooting the film, all throughout the film he was kind of moving the hump around on his back, back and forth. And he was
just doing it as an inside joke.
Yeah, and nobody really noticed. And finally, the other cast members started to notice, and it just because of that became part of the film and was added to the script. So just something an actor does, everybody, because of the way they react to it, it becomes part of the film. Hey,
another snapshot of why Marty Feldman was so talented. Because after Young Frankenstein came out, I wound up, he was a very successful comedian in Great Britain.
Wow.
That's where he came from. And nobody knew who he was in the United States until he did Young Frankenstein. And so I wound up watching some of the comedy stuff, and he was a very, very successful comedian in Great Britain.
Wow, I had no idea. Okay, wow. And speaking of that, the scene in Young Frankenstein that required the most takes to film was the one in which Igor bites Elizabeth's animal wrap, because each time he'd film the scene, actor Marty Feldman would be left with a piece of fur in his mouth, which caused the other cast members to break out into hysterical laughter. I mean, Could you just imagine that?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
Getting over a bug.
That's all right.
Marty Feldman was very, very talented, and I would imagine that that's what a comedian winds up doing.
Yeah.
When you're nervous, you counter it with comedy.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
I've heard a number of other comedians mention the same thing.
Yeah.
Whenever you get into like dicey situations and stuff like that, you can kind of, ease it down or lower the temperature, by throwing out some comedy and everything. But, there's just, there's a ton of people that have no idea who Marty Feldman was.
No.
Or didn't follow him after and everything like that. The guy was very, very talented, and then look at those instances that you just brought up.
Yeah.
They're just off the cuff things that he came up with that they decided to put in the film that we're talking about right now as priceless.
And I'll say this: I'm not surprised to hear you say this about Marty Feldman, only for the fact that I don't know as much about this guy as you do, but just basing on what I saw of Young Frankenstein that he was able to do with that character of Igor, which is one of the characters, like you said, Gar, really kind of stood out to me in this film. So I'm not surprised to hear what you just had to say about this guy. And I'd be interested to go back and kind of do some research on and find out more about him. Just that's really amazing that this guy was quite experienced, I guess, even before Young Frankenstein as an actor.
Well, there's a reason why he got the gig.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks and whoever else behind the movie, they saw it too.
And I'm going to tell you something funny. We're going to get ready to wrap this up before we do, though. Last night I was finishing, doing some research for the show today, and then I woke up this morning and thought, just missing a little something. So I went and found a little something extra, and I think you're going to have an appreciation for this, because like we were saying with the 1931 film, a lot of times as movies are being made, things kind of accidentally happen. So anyways, Mel Brooks asked the costume designer Dorothy Jenkins to have actress Madeline Kahn show as much cleavage as they could get away with in 1974. And strange fact, ironically, as Gar, that they were able to get away with a lot more in the 1931 Frankenstein film because they had not enforced the motion picture production code yet. Now, when we were doing this episode on Frankenstein, I was reading up on this motion picture production code. I thought, I'd like to know a little bit more about what this is. So I'm looking this up. Anybody interested? The motion picture production code was a set of industry guidelines for self-censorship that was used for most American motion pictures that were released from 1934 to 1968. So as a result of films that were made back, let's say 1931, such as Frankenstein, we mentioned how people reacted to the line in the original film, I know what it's like to be God. Okay, and as a result, they thought, okay, somebody has to kind of start thinking about censoring films. That had never been done before. And then after the 1931 film, I guess they started doing this in 1934. And these were some of the things they were looking at.
I'm sure they're the same people that were behind married people having to sleep in separate beds.
Yeah, I mean, and that even goes back to when we were talking about the Flintstones. Where like Wilma and Fred were the first married couple on TV to sleep in, the same bed or whatever. But just to give you a giggle here, so once they came up with this motion picture code, this is what we're talking about. There could be no pointed profanity by either the title of the film or somebody saying any kind of profanity throughout the film. I mean, could you imagine if they really stay true to this, in modern day films, and they're talking about stuff where you cannot even use the word Jesus Christ, God or Lord, unless... You
couldn't even say the word pregnant.
Yeah, unless they were... you could say God or Lord or Jesus if you were referenced like a religious ceremony. So like if somebody's getting married in the film and you say, you're standing here before God, that's all right. But there could be no God damn it or anything like that in films back in the day.
It was very different times, and I grew up.
Yeah.
You know, I was a little kid during those times, and I remember it. You know, it's you know, that's the one thing that I've learned from being on this earth for so many years, because I'm getting up there in my years.
Yeah.
Is that what society deems as unacceptable at one time can be completely different at another time.
I mean, a good example of that, I mean, so there's once upon a time when a film or, you know, a play like Jesus Christ Superstar could not even be performed, you know? I mean, just think about that.
just because of the name.
And you know, and then also I was reading part of this list, this censoring list, you could have no suggestive nudity in a film, even by a silhouette. So like if you had a naked woman and you can see her breast kind of showing in a silhouette like shadow, that wasn't even allowed back in the day. I mean, and how many films have you seen that's got some kind of, you know, nudity in it? I mean, but that is what they had to kind of censor themselves on, and really was quite different back in the day. And then you could not show the illegal trafficking of drugs in a film. Not that they do now, but I mean, when you have all these like films about people, you know, these drug dealers and stuff. I mean, there's a time, I guess, when you could not even show that in a film. You just kind of had to insinuate that
was going on.
Yeah. And see, I do think there's a reason why you censor certain things. For example, you know, there's a time when you could not even have a film about somebody being molested in their life. I mean, you're not gonna take a kid and put them in a film and show them being molested. Of course not. But you know, like you can even do a documentary where somebody's talking about it. So, I mean, I do think there's certain things, you know, that need to be censored or not allowed. But I think, you know, if you look at modern film, they've taken it where some things still need to be censored, but it's not to the point where you can't even say Jesus Christ in the film, you know.
Well, you know, just understand, you know, that things that we even deem acceptable today, right now, as we exist right now in October of 2021.
Yeah, it'd be quite different, you know, maybe.
Go 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
And there will be things that are acceptable now.
Yeah.
Socially acceptable amongst all of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That in 10 years will not be acceptable.
Yeah, and see, here's
you know, history proves it.
Oh, yeah. And here's another one. There could not be any mention or suggestion of sexual perversion. Now, I mean, again, it depends on what the film is on. I could see what they're saying. You know, you can't show anybody really being a pervert in the film, but the fact that you couldn't even suggest it or say, okay, this guy went to jail because he's a child beater or whatever. I mean, or he, you know, did whatever with a little kid. I mean, there are films about that all over the place these days, but back in the day, again, you couldn't even suggest that somebody had a dirty mind or that they were.
Well, you couldn't show you couldn't show cleavage with the Madeline Kahn character back in 1974.
Yeah.
But you could say, "Wow, what knockers!"
Yeah. Again, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
And again, you know, going back to what we just said about Young Frankenstein and Mel Brooks wanting to show off the cleavage as much as they could get away with. I mean, could you imagine with the Me Too movement and everything today that if he had made this film and told somebody that, it's, oh my God, you know,
I mean,
this film should be banned.
Don't societal shift.
Never go see a Mel Brooks film. He's a pervert. I mean, I could just see it.
Same thing with Blazing Saddles.
I mean,
they'd never be able to get something like that off the ground nowadays.
Yeah, now.
But you know, I mean, it's just you know, you wouldn't even be able to do a remake of Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, I mean,
nowadays.
Now they're trying to ban that
with how what society deems as acceptable, because that's something that is, you can't control it. Society decides it. It's like trying to control something like that. It's like trying to control the ocean.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You can't.
Yeah.
And society's going to decide what's going to be acceptable now and what's not going to be acceptable now. And it's a constant shift. It's a constant change. So just understand what people are making moral judgments on. Right now, those moral judgments are going to change, because all you have to do is look at history, and you will see constantly that happen.
And here,
you know what I mean? That's one thing that I don't think will ever change, is a society changing what they feel is acceptable.
Yeah.
Whether people, there's always going to be some people that are going to agree with it, and there's always going to be people that are going to disagree with it. But nobody can control it. No one can control it.
And then, and here's another one I got a kick out of. You could not have any mention or suggestion of sex hygiene, or even mention anybody having like a venereal disease. I mean, even if you look at like some of our favorite classic TV shows from the 80s, they would have the episode where somebody sits down and mom and dad talks to the kids about sex and the proper way to do it and all this. I mean, so when this was going on, you couldn't even have a show like that.
No, it was a completely different time, with a completely different set of rules. I mean, seriously, a completely different set of rules.
Yeah, and then and then again, here's another good one. You couldn't have a movie where you even had a scene showing actual childbirth. I don't know that you would do that, but even in a scene where somebody's supposedly having a baby, you couldn't even show that on TV. It just kind of amazes me. And then this kind of makes sense, and I think it goes with what a lot you're talking about in modern day. You cannot have willfully have anything in the film to offend any nation, race, or creed. I mean, I get that, but I do think like even you've been hearing probably lately, like this comedian David Chappelle, he's getting a lot of controversy. He has a Netflix special, and he says kind of some racial jokes. I mean, and he's a black comedian, and he's kind of doing it just to get a rise out of people. But it's a comedy special. The guy is kind of, he's not really trying to offend anybody. But that's what's kind of funny. People kind of they tell others what they should be offended at, if you know what I mean.
Well, what I've learned about situations like that, or situations where people are trying to
censor.
Well, it's kind of.
I think kind of the point you're trying to make is like, okay, I kind of feel like something like that. If you want to watch the guy's comedy special, go ahead. If you don't want to watch it, you don't have to. But don't try and get it banned or taken off of Netflix because you don't.
Well, what my point is if you do try to get it banned, all you're going to do is make people more excited to gravitate towards it.
Exactly, and that's exactly what has happened.
That's I mean, I constantly see where people are really, I first became aware of it when there was the politician wives back in the 80s trying to determine what records kids could buy and what records kids couldn't buy, and they couldn't. It was determined that's not constitutionally legal to make that determination. So then they had to put labels on it.
PMRC,
Remember that?
The PMRC, and
right, and they tried to put and all that did was took the younger crowd and made them want it even more. In fact, when the younger crowd was going to the record store, what are they looking for? They're looking for the records with that label on it, because that's the ones they wanted. The ones that people are trying to keep away from them. So whenever you try to do that, all you're really doing is throwing gas on the flames.
Yeah,
that's all you're doing.
In fact, I remember the stickers said explicit lyric, and I remember the three guys that showed up to those Senate hearings, and they could not be more different from each other. Dee Snider, John Denver, Country Road.
I think Frank Zappa was part of that too.
Frank Zappa. I mean, for John Denver to trying to ban John Denver, just think about that. That's all I can say.
Well, it's just, but that's the point. Anytime you try to ban something or try to keep, that's the worst thing you could do if you're really trying to accomplish that. Yeah. They did it with Ozzy.
Yeah.
Remember Ozzy Osbourne back in the 80s? They were trying to, cancel Ozzy back in the day, and all that did was just threw gas on the fire, and then his popularity shot through the roof.
I mean, his wife years later, just even recently, kind of got canceled because one of her co-hosts didn't like something she said, and they kind of deemed her a racist, and got her kicked off the show. Very, very sad the way that happened, and we're going to get ready to wrap it up. Before we do, Gar, I just want to say, but really kind of we went off on this tangent is, like I said, as I was reading all this stuff on Young Frankenstein, I'm coming to find out like a lot of interesting things, because some of these classic films we talked about were made, things like this censoring board popped up, fact that he wanted to use like the same set from original 1931 film. I thought, isn't it amazing? Even a set designer getting a credit on, because he also provided that same set for Young Frankenstein. How interesting, he actually received a credit that he did not receive on the original film. Just think about that.
Awesome.
And so that's why we talk about all this stuff, because stuff like that comes up, and I thought, as much as I love talking about these films, it's also kind of fun to bring up these fun, interesting things that pop up as a result of these films that were made.
Well, they didn't just use the set; they used the same castle too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wasn't even aware. That is amazing, and I think we'll let people know, Gar, in 2 weeks when we do this again, because I know you're such a Trekkie. We're going to talk about the fact that 2021 marks the 55th anniversary of the original Star Trek series, and that's going to be a ton of fun to talk about when we do it in 2 weeks.
Well, when we were talking about that earlier, I grew up on that, and I just remember, Star Trek was, it wasn't just a big part of, mine and my sister's life, but also my parents. My parents, absolutely were addicted to that show.
Oh, yeah.
And, I just remember, well, we'll talk about it at that time. We're going to wind up starting another hour.
family entertainment, but I'm going to end on this, is not only was it a classic for its time, and it's amazed of what it went on to become, but I think like a lot of us, that the original TV series is what it started off on. That's what a lot of us go back to.
Absolutely. It was a big part of my childhood.
And we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks. So thank you, Gar Borras, for going back in time, all the way back to 1974 in your time machine today. It's been a great ride to go back there. I really enjoyed it. So take care, my friend.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's really an honor to be part of this. It really, truly is.
Well, I can honestly say could not do it without you, and you were a true inspiration for this episode today, because like I said, you were the one that suggested. I'm glad you did, because it reminded me of what a great film this was. I enjoyed watching it the other night.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart, dude. I love this movie.
Okay, love you too, dude. Bye.